Hello! It's that time of the month again. I'm having my menopause, but it's also okay because everybody's losing their shit because that time of month again. And now they get to lose their shit again because of wrong think from a pinhead, as usual. Because it's the political commentary of the month. Shoot me. Let's do it. Today, I'm going to talk about gun control. Get all gun control. I am far from a gun guy. It's kind of like cars. They're commonplace. I understand their uses. They're practical in those uses usually. Other than that, I really could care less. But I definitely do have a stance on the whole gun control debate, debacle, whatever you want to call it, argument. And I know for a fact it is an unpopular position. At least one specific aspect of what I would propose is the smartest, most intelligent, logical, and common sense thing to do to improve gun control in this country, in the United States, is to reform two things, add one thing. And the one thing I'm adding is the one thing that I know that both sides would hate me for. Because it would either be too far, or not far enough. And in fact, to one of the sides of the debate, it would actually be not only too far, it would also be not far enough with the same people. Being far from a gun guy, I'm not really into them at all, of course. And I am not even a gun and self-defense kind of person. I'm not. And for the record, I did write or tweet about this because I ended up joining Twitter regrettably in like February or March because of the podcast me and my buddy Sean were doing. Hasn't gone anywhere. So we haven't gone past like recording 9 episodes. Creating this Twitter account was pretty redundant at that point, and I'm already considering potentially getting rid of it. Again? But anyway, different story. For context, I will be reading off of some of my threads I did. I am absolutely a pro-Second Amendment guy. And I will absolutely defend the Second Amendment and defend people who defend it. In the sense of, like, it's the most logical position to have. Defend the fucking Second Amendment. Let people be able to get themselves armed. If they want to be armed, it makes them feel safer, fantastic. If it's for sport, fantastic. If it's for hunting, fantastic. If it's for some combination of the above, fantastic. If it's for survival, fantastic. It doesn't matter. Let them have that freedom. That is essential to me. And to, obviously, millions of others. That said, there is a very logical reason why the Second Amendment was ever a thing. Within the Second Amendment, there is the line in it which is a well-armed citizen militia. In a modern context, in the way our society is trying to manipulate our minds around that, it's like, oh, that's a super dangerous negative thing, we can't have that. But you're looking at it wrong. You've been too indoctrinated to realize what that really means. The well-armed citizen militia is not to protect themselves against their fellow citizens or against foreign invaders or against, foreign nations or militaries or even illegal immigrants. It's strictly against their own federal or own national government. That's what that well-armed citizen militia and the Second Amendment is literally specifically for, is so that it gives you, yes, the nationally legal right, and not even only legal right, a hard encouragement and recommendation to, yes, invade the fucking Capitol, and even invade the White House, and tell them to get the fuck out. If they are not serving you, they are not representing you, they're not doing their jobs as they're supposed to, being a public servant to we the people, and we do not feel we're represented, we do not feel like we're being listened to, we feel like we're experiencing what is by definition tyranny. And it doesn't seem like it's going to change. The well-armed citizen militia, the well-armed citizenry, with the Second Amendment, giving them the ability to do that, is then highly encouraged and given the legal precedent to storm the Capitol, to storm the White House, in every other place of government, and literally point the guns at them and say, you're going to get the hell out, because this is an ultimatum. You walk out now, you never come back, you're never having any power again, or you're going to go out of here in a body bag. It's one or the other. Because it's a well-armed citizen militia. In other words, you get out dead or alive. It's your choice. But you better make up your mind pretty quick. That's the entire point of it. That is an essential thing, because the Founding Fathers knew back then, because they came from one of those nations, by the way, not only that, they've seen throughout world history, especially in Europe, that this was commonplace. They would take away your right to guns, or they wouldn't even give you right to weapons, certainly not firearms, once they became a thing, because they knew that was a threat to their control and power over you, the citizen, the serf, the servant, the slave. Giggity. And so, that was the reason why they never wanted that, and it never was there, because of the fact that they knew it endangered them. The rich, oligarchic, powerful kings, queens, prime ministers, presidents, whatever the fuck your nation historically and currently calls themselves, their leaders, and their senators or whatever else you have, right? That's the entire point of the Second Amendment, is you don't serve us, we're going to serve you a notice. You're getting out, dead or alive. Which one is it going to be? Power of the people. And it's ensuring self-defense against a tyrannical government, a corrupted government. That's the entire point of the Second Amendment. Therefore, I will always be a firm defender of the Second Amendment, and those who continue to point out that that's what it is for. Oh, and by the way, that's technically what the Founding Fathers and all the colonial citizens at the time did. They armed themselves, so they became themselves the well-armed citizen militia against their government, which was tyrannical, which just so happened to be, Great Britain, England, the United Kingdom, whatever you want to call it. And they fought a war of independence. A revolutionary war, the war of later in the War of Independence. That's how the United States even came to be in the first place. They took it from personal experience, literally, as well. They realized the only way we're going to be able to get our freedoms and get what we wanted out of that in our self-representation is going to be if we go to war with them. We need to arm ourselves and our citizens very well. We need some training, and we need to prepare ourselves for a battle plan so we can wage a war against our tyrannical, monarchical, maniacal assholes that we call leaders, and for yourselves. There's historical precedents. History itself literally defends the necessary need, so the literal necessity for a Second Amendment in every nation in the world, let alone in the United States. And I also am like super defensive, well, not super defensive, but I am somebody who is very willing and happy to defend people's rights to own as many firearms as they want, of as many types as they desire. Would I myself do that? Fuck no. Would I understand why somebody would do that? No. But then again, it's kind of like cars, right? People love to collect. They have hobbies. They have deep interests and passions for certain things. And usually, there's a fair amount of people that won't understand those passions or why the fuck somebody would even have that as a passion and hobby, but they do. In this case, this is collecting firearms of various eras, makes, models, types, so on. It's just life working as life does, right? It's not a unique situation. It's the most normal thing ever. So yeah, I will never understand or grasp the weird love, the passion that people have for collecting and having tons of firearms, but it's kind of akin to people who do that with cars, or they do that with cards, or they do that with antiques, or they do that with whatever God knows else, you know. It's like, I'll never understand any of that, but I understand the reason why it is a thing, and I'll always defend that freedom to collect, and to have that passion, and to be able to continue to live it up and out. And obviously, you know, for the pickier people, there is exceptions to that. Obviously, I'm not going to be supportive at all of anybody ever owning something over the top like a fucking bazooka. Or screw police. But yeah, I'll always stand by and advocate for their rights to have a personal collection or even arsenal. And that's even so, even with me only be really only really comfortable with owning and using guns for shooting practice, sport, and of course, most specifically and most definitely hunting. Like, beyond that, self-defense and stuff like that, I'm actually not a big advocate for that. I will always advocate for people's right to do that, and I always defend that. But I personally don't like it, and I don't agree with it. but I'll still defend it because it's a necessary right that people should have. Here's the proposals I have for what I would consider common sense gun control. So effectively what you do is you would implement a much deeper and further in-depth background check. So in other words, way more in-depth than it is now, but you also need to add a intensive, and I mean a very intensive, very long psychiatric evaluation. And one of the main purposes of being so long and so intense is intentionally to try to provoke a reaction, a very negative reaction out of the person. That's the entire point. The reactions, the emotions. If you can pretty easily and pretty quickly trigger that person and make them negatively and emphatically react with negative emotions or literal physical reactions, that person, in my opinion, should not be allowed to own a gun. Because they are, now at that point to me, far too risky. They're far too high risk to be trusted with a gun, at least for self-defense. Because frankly, if you're that hypersensitive to be that easily triggered into a really negative reaction, and maybe even to the extent where it's targeted at specific groups, specific peoples, companies, what have you, that should be considered a major red flag and a major safety concern and issue, and thus disallow you and disbar you from ever even beginning to get your permits to be able to then own a gun. So on top of those two, this is probably the most common sense to me and the most agreeable, I think, for most people, is going to be the requirement that you get a full gun handling and gun safety set of classes. Not one class, but a bunch of different classes. And you have to pass it clean. So you have to have a certificate you get, or a card you get, that is literally a verification that yes, you passed the gun handling and safety courses that you were required to go through before you'll even begin to be able to get a permit to be able to purchase, own, and utilize a firearm. I sincerely believe that is essential. You gotta have that. So you can ensure that people are highly responsible individuals with their firearms. They're not too erratic and too unpredictable. They're not too irritable and triggerable of people. That's a psychiatric one. They don't have a criminal background that could be violent and maybe multiple counts, which is even worse because then it means that they're repeats. You don't want that. They shouldn't be allowed to have a weapon, at least a firearm. And then on top of that, the latter is to make sure that beyond those two pieces, these people are not only stable and not dangerous, but they're also responsible and safe. Like, that's the entire basis. So those three things, I think, are common sense gun control. I think that that's what needs to happen. But could not be more against banning of any guns. Other than, again, the most obvious ones being things that are really over the top, like a fucking bazooka or RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade, a launcher, a rocket launcher, a grenade launcher. That kind of shit, I don't think anybody should be able to own at all, but that's me. But I think that that's way too far and over the top. I understand that it's going to cause more enthusiasm, I think, and more people to be that much more morbidly interested in them, because like, oh, because, you know, it's America, right? That's another part of the mentality and the culture here. People are deeply rebellious. If you revoke any kind of a right, or even suggest you revoke kind of a right, but especially if you actually do, you revoke a right, you revoke a constitutional amendment, you revoke their ability to do something, to say something, to feel something, to express something, whatever, to own something, to buy something, whatever it is, they become that much more determined to say, well, fuck you, I'm getting it anyway. And they do it. And that brings me to my reasoning of why, if you are supportive of banning guns, you need to consider these facts. The main and most dominant one is, if you are supportive of banning guns, whether specific kinds, all of a type, all guns, or even a single type of gun, you have to consider this. Do you remember Prohibition? The banning of alcohol? How exactly did that work for them, for this nation? Because if you're honest, it backfired horrifically and miserably. And it only created a surplus of demand for alcohol. Not only that, it also causes skyrocketing in profit for the makers and manufacturers of the alcohol, the distributors, and the sellers of said prohibited, illegal alcohol. And in turn created a glut of new moguls and magnates in the industry. That's what it created. And of course, it also resulted in all alcohol making up half of America's blood supply by this point anyway in time. Like, if you think about it, it wasn't as popular as it became after Prohibition. That's when America became obsessed with alcohol. And now it's just about every age group, including the illegal age groups, have guaranteed probably had at least a good few big sips and swigs of some kind of alcohol at some point during their growing up years. Every generation has had alcohol, and it's actually painfully rare to find anybody in this country, and no matter their political or religious affiliations or lack thereof, that isn't liking and loving or drinking pretty consistently of some kind of alcohol. And that literally is, for sure, a direct result. Historically, it's pretty easy to track. A direct result of Prohibition. It backfired that horrifically. So, that was because Prohibition was the banning of alcohol, and it did exactly the opposite of what, and everything the opposite of what the intended result was supposed to have been. The banning, prohibition of alcohol. So that's why you gotta consider that. History, especially in this nation, proves that's what usually happens when you ban something that people are into and passionate about in this country, or ban anything really, that they've always had a right to. They will get so upset and so livid, you actually cause the exact opposite to transpire of what the intended effect was of your prohibition. You're making illegal whatever that was. In this case, in the example, alcohol, and now guns. Which is why you have to consider prohibition if you're all for and supportive of banning certain kinds of guns, all guns, certain kinds of types of guns, or a certain gun in particular. You have to consider that. You also have to remember, back when they made prohibition a thing, it was so said by the government for the greater good and health of the people and families of America, of this nation. That's what it was. They're saying the same thing now about supposedly gun bans. So you have to consider that aspect of prohibition as well, because it really miserably backfired abhorrently. Especially in this country, it backfires more aggressively than you could ever imagine. Now here's another thing to consider. What is one of the top, and this is really topical, especially the day I'm recording this, with Roe v. Wade being overturned today. What is one of the top arguments that pro-abortion folks love to make? If you ban abortions, women will just get them illegally and safely anyway. And so if that's the case with any kind of a ban on abortion, and it never was more truth when prohibition, the banning of alcohol, was, what suddenly changes there that suddenly makes it untrue when it comes to the idea of banning guns? Like, you legitimately have to think that through and consider that, because that suddenly invalidates your argument there. Because if that was true, universally, if there's any kind of a ban on abortions, and it was obviously never more true with alcohol, what suddenly changes it to make it untrue with banning guns? The truth is, you damn well know, you're smart enough, you just don't want to believe it because it's inconvenient to your agenda and your narrative and your beliefs and what you want, but it's very blatantly clear that there's no way you don't know the fact of reality is it will backfire on you. So one the final thing to acknowledge, recognize, and consider next time you advocate for banning any kind of guns. The culture and the mentality resulting from that of this country is one of deep, deep rebellion and fuck you attitude. The harder and the more you push against a right, a freedom, and a choice, the louder people will yell fuck you, and the harder they'll push back. Fight and ensure they keep and protect the ability to purchase and do whatever it is that has been made illegal, banned, prohibited. That's the American mentality. So you gotta take all those things into full consideration next time you advocate for a ban on guns. No matter if it's a ban on one single gun, all guns, or specific kinds of guns. You have to consider these facts of history and reality when you find yourself passionately supporting any kind of a gun ban. Because in the end, the only thing that banning guns will do in this nation, the United States, this causes an immense backfiring of the entire thing immediately, and it will guarantee make the entirety of prohibition. Wow, that's a Freudian slip. Prohibition look like it was nothing at all in comparison, because it will inevitably backfire, and you won't do anything but ensure even more people create new demand for firearms. You'll create magnates and moguls practically overnight, and smuggling will be absurdly profitable and commonplace too. That's exactly what happened with Prohibition. It's just going to be far worse with guns. That's a guarantee, especially nowadays. And that's a simple fact. And the history and the mentality of this country, America, proves it. A classic case of better watch what you wish for in action, because you're clearly failing to look far enough to truly realize and know just what you're creating and ensuring will transpire if you succeed with your wishes of banning guns. It will only result in prohibition on steroids. You just have to consider these things when it comes down to gun control. And that's why, again, like I said in more the prior half, those are my three, to me, common sense gun control concepts that I think every state should adopt, so that you can ensure that nothing bad happens. Now, I've already had somebody who's, at least I would assume, probably themselves consider themselves much more liberal than even I am nowadays at the current time in 2022, because I used to be way more left and liberal than I am now, even though I still would absolutely consider myself classically liberal in terms of my overall values, my overall political stances and things like that. He would probably, I'm assuming he would probably consider himself that much more liberal, but he doesn't agree with the intensive mental evaluations, because he's pointing out that, like, especially this year, already there's records broken all over across the country for the amount of just wild, stupid crimes and shit that's been happening, and people losing their fucking minds, literally. And drug use, and everything else that makes people that much less predictable and that much more dangerous. And I get that, but why I would disagree with him on that stance, in that line of reasoning, is simple. And I think it's obvious, and it's this. That would just be accepting the status quo. Oh, well, it's too late now, it's already bad, so yeah, we shouldn't support that, that's just not relevant anymore. It almost feels like that's really an argument in favor of having it, actually. The argument against it is what I feel like argues for it. I think that's just stupid, because that's, again, acceptance of status quo. And I think that that's more dangerous than stepping right up into the face, yelling at and challenging the fuck with utmost confidence out of the things that we know shouldn't be accepted because they're just status quo, but they're still not good enough, and demand change. These are the things that has to happen. You have to stand up fervently in its face, undying, martyristically, and say, I'm not stopping, I'm not backing down, and I'm not shutting the fuck up until you change this shit for the better. Because it's the only way it can. Don't ever accept status quo. Unless it really is for something that's not that important and not that powerful in life. At that point, yeah, no, at that point, don't even think about it. Just throw it away in the garbage can and be like, I'm getting away from this. Because it doesn't matter at that point. It would be a waste of your time. That's my point of view on the gun control debate and what my suggestions would be. So, that will be the political commentary for the month of Juli 2022. Words have been said. I'm sure plenty of offense has been taken. And I'll see you later. Stay safe out there. Make sure you tear me apart and counsel me, especially on Twitter and 4chan, as essential. Oh, and Reddit. And other cesspools of the internet, and I'll see you later. Pinhead out.